Faith Church, hope you're doing well. It's November 23rd, Monday, another edition of House to House. Came across today a great quote from C.S. Lewis. Almost everything C.S. Lewis wrote is quotable. I think I maybe have said two things in my life that are quotable, but he has a lot. But this quote really struck me, and I thought it was fitting for this week especially. He once wrote, "Gratitude looks to the past. Love looks to the present. Fear, greed, lust, and ambition look to the future." I want to take just a second to reflect on what he's saying there, which I think is really helpful. Gratitude really does look to the past. I mean, I suppose we can be grateful in the present, maybe even for the future, but mostly when we're grateful, it's because we're looking back to see how we have been blessed, either by other people or especially by God. I think it's one of the reasons why in Scripture God tells Israel in the Old Testament and the church in the New Testament over and over again to remember. I mean, think how many times we're told in Scripture to remember. Because we get caught up in the present circumstances and we get overwhelmed. We forget how often and how faithfully God has provided, and remembering helps us to reset and to be assured that God is faithful. You know that word for the Lord's Supper, Eucharist. Sometimes we call the Lord's Supper the Eucharist. It's a Greek word that literally just means thanksgiving. That's what we're called to do when Jesus tells us to break the bread and remember his body, to pour out the cup and remember his blood. Remember what God has done and give thanks for the gift of life that we have. And so I love that gratitude looks to the past. Secondly, that love then looks to the present. And I think once we are reminded of God's faithfulness in the past, we are brought to peace knowing that God will continue to be faithful. And then we don't have to be anxious, and we can just be present and love those around us, whoever they are in the present. It's hard to love in the future, in the past. We really do just love in the moment, whoever is there in front of us. And then I don't think it's fear and greed and lust and ambition do look to the future, but what ought to look to the future is hope. And that's for a follower of Christ. It's hope that even in spite of circumstances, we know because God has been faithful, we remember that. We have hope in the future, no matter what circumstances come, that he will be faithful still. And that one day he will come and he will set all things right. I mentioned this this week because it's Thanksgiving. We'll be celebrating Thursday. And I would encourage you, like I talked about yesterday, that to make Thanksgiving a habit in your life, to especially this week, but always, but to take time to literally to write down, to say aloud, to repeat and rehearse the things and the ways that God has been faithful and to which we can give thanks. And I'd encourage you to even this Thursday to be specific. In 2020, we tend to want to complain about this year, and there's been a lot that have been hard, and there's a lot to lament and to grieve over the loss that we've experienced. But there's also a lot to be grateful for, even this year. And so I would challenge you and encourage you to try to be grateful by remembering what God has done this year in the midst of the hardship. A couple of the reminders that we will gather tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning at 7:30 on Zoom for the gathering for prayer. This has been a really good time just to take half an hour, 30 minutes, and pray through a psalm. We're going to pray through Psalm 84 tomorrow morning. It's one that we read as a church yesterday. Also, so it's the Zoom link is on the email here. Love to have you join us. And then also our nominating committee is at work, and some of you will receive a call in the next week likely to consider an invitation to becoming an elder or a deacon. And I would only ask that you can take that consideration seriously, that you take time to pray and come to the meeting they'll be invited to and hear the possibilities, and then pray about it and see if God might be calling you towards that position of leadership and servanthood in our church. Let's certainly all of us pray for God's leading, the Spirit's leading as we discern his call on those men and women who will be stepping into positions of leadership. Grateful for each of you, grateful for the time to worship yesterday, and I pray that you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. It'll look different, but I hope it'll still be a great blessing for you and your family. Wherever you are today, may you know the love of your Father in heaven and the grace of Christ and the unity of the Spirit. Peace.